You're watching the Compulsive Gun Buyer.
The offset versus piggyback-mounted red dot debate has been a hot topic for a while in the gun world, with opinions swinging between favoring one or the other depending on the day, with conventional wisdom being heavily influenced, as always, by the competition and professional worlds. And I'm going to pick on a couple of my favorite YouTubers in this video, because I think they got this wrong. That is, of course, Hopophile and Brass Facts. Quite the dynamic duo. And by pick on, I really just mean genuinely disagree with. And I'd love for them to respond because I value and appreciate their opinions. And if you are not following them, seriously, go check them out. Although I'm pretty sure our audiences already overlap pretty heavily, minute as mine may be. So let me start off by saying, I have tried both piggyback and offset red dot positions, but my preference is for offset red dots for most rifle setups. And as far as I can tell, Brass Facts and Hop, we'll call them Brass Hops for short, seem to strongly prefer piggyback red dots. Basically discounting offset red dots as a nice concept, but impractical in the real world. My fear is that in this super temperamental community, folks will abandon their perfectly good setups based on someone else's negative personal experience that might not mirror their own. Also, quick disclaimer, I'm not a great shooter, and I bet both these guys could outshoot me any day of the week, so take what I say with a grain of salt. In fact, take it with a giant salt lick. Alright, disclaimers out of the way, the argument against offset red dots seems to revolve around three concepts. Shooting around cover, / non-flat range shooting positions, in other words, real world conditions. Speed / stability compared to LPVOs. And finally, shooting under nods, night vision. We'll discuss cover first, since I think this is the most interesting.
Start trying to peel around cover while using an offset. It's a fucking shit show, right? Both sides, right? If you're peeling left around, right? It's flipped because I'm a lefty. You're peeling left around, you have to expose a lot more of your body. You're peeling right around, and you have to snap your fucking spine in half to get around the piece of cover. And considering most realistic shooting outside of home defense is going to be utilizing cover, otherwise you're fucking dead, I would say the offset positioned red dot is actually worse than the 12 o'clock. And the 12 o'clock, in my opinion, like I said, not very good.
So the claim is that offset red dots are worse than top-mounted red dots for peeling around cover / room clearing. I was intrigued by this and decided to test it out. My offset is on my right side, so when popping around a corner on the right, I wanted to see how much of my elbow would stick out and if this was an issue. So this is me with the primary optic, and this is me with the offset red dot. I'm not convinced this difference is significant enough to worry about. Now, Brass Facts is correct that popping out left and trying to use my offset would be dumb. In this case, I would resort to my primary optic, usually an LPVO with a nice 1X, like the Razor 1-10 or the Night Force NX8. Okay, so what about some other cover scenarios? Popping up over cover would seem to favor offsets or your primary, since piggyback will require you to expose much more of your body than necessary. Shooting under cars and all the other VTAC barricade positions end up being a mixed bag, but I will say that the height over bore challenges that you face with the piggyback option can be pretty frustrating. For instance, if you have a small window to shoot through, you might not be able to see your target and get your barrel through at the same time. So basically, when you are working with non-conventional shooting positions, you use whatever optic you can pick up fastest while exposing the least amount of your body. And it's going to be based on the specific scenario. You can't plan for them all, and you will always have your primary optic as an option if the others are not well suited. Okay, so let's move on to speed and stability.
The 1X setting of even a mediocre LPVO is going to be a faster and more stable way to shoot than a piggyback or offset red dots for almost all shooters in almost all conditions.
Yes, I know. There's a video on the internet with T-Rex arms with a fucking red dot in this position, a red dot in the offset position, and he shoots both of them as fast. But A, fuck you, you're not T-Rex arms. This doesn't apply to you. And B, that was a pre-set up 3-gun style stage. He could start with the gun in the stock. He was not pieing off of cover. He was not doing all this kinds of stuff. He was not engaging targets that were not silhouetted. You name it.
This one, I don't get at all. I agree that piggybacks are not great for close shots, but this is why offsets are a thing, because they provide a level of speed and stability that is worlds better than piggyback red dots. So grouping offsets and piggybacks together as if they are both bad for CQB doesn't make sense to me. Now, I can only speak from my own experience, but I have found offset red dots to be as fast or faster than standard red dots, and I find the stability and recoil control to be better too, probably due to the slight chicken wing stance. And in terms of speed, yeah, it takes a bit of practice to get the muscle memory down, but far less than a top-mounted optic. And remember, it's not like Call of Duty where you have to roll the rifle up, passing your primary optic on the way to get to the offset red dot. You just bring it straight up, pick up the red dot, take your shot. I think I'm backed up in my view by the popularity of offsets in the competition world, where shooters often prefer the offset to their LPVOs at 1x. So for standard flat range style shooting, I think the offset red dot actually can function as a primary optic, and has the upper hand on most other options. Which I think is the point Lucas was making 2 years back when he made this video, linked to here. So the last criticism of the offset red dot is it doesn't work well with night vision.
For passive aiming with night vision, an offset dot probably won't really work because the primary optic is going to be in the way of where your night vision device is, so good luck with that.
This one I get, but I think it's overblown. I'm pretty sure some people think you can't shoot offset red dots at all with night vision, and this simply isn't true. This is me shooting my SCAR 17, passive aiming through an offset Delta Point Pro, the night vision model. It's easy enough to pick up and keep during target transitions, though will certainly require practice. Now, there are some important things to consider if you're going to use an offset red dot with nods. First, you have to mount the red dot forward, preferably in front of your primary optic. This is the only practical way to mount an offset in my opinion. I haven't run those integrated offset mounts from ScalarWorks and the like, but I imagine they work fine as long as it's pretty far forward. Now, you basically have to treat this like passive aiming through a lower third co-witness sight. So you have to cock your head a bit to the side and secure the gun high on your shoulder. Which brings me to my next point, which is when it comes to stocks, the taller the stock, the better. In fact, the SCAR UGG boot is actually perfect for this. Here you can see the Magpul SL compared to the B5 SOP mod stock and the SCAR. So just be aware that this is something you can change on your rifle to make life a little bit easier if this is something you plan to do a lot. Also, passive aiming with a single tube is just not fun no matter what, but this does get worse with offsets. So dual tubes are really the way to go, which I know isn't an easy thing to acquire necessarily. Otherwise, you just lose too much of your field of view trying to look through the optic window, especially if you are at all viewing through the optic at an angle, which you probably are since it's basically a lower 1/3 configuration. Dual tubes give you a bit more grace and allow you to pick up your target and the dot without being precisely lined up with either. That said, you can probably make it work with enough practice. So, if you have a PVS-14, I concede that a top-mounted red dot would be the easiest to use under night vision. But that brings me to my final point, which is, how often are you really going to be passive aiming at all? I mean, I get that the tactical debate on this is pretty hot, but I think many of us, brass facts included, are in the active aiming as a primary method camp, which makes this a secondary function of the red dot in an already secondary category of night shooting, right? I mean, if you are setting up a rifle with a magnified optic and red dot, it's probably not your primary night fighter. So to summarize the case for offset red dots. First, I am agreed that in many instances, neither an offset nor piggyback red dot will suffice as a primary optic all of the time. But brass hops seem to argue that they are always secondary or backup optics, which I think is wrong. In specific instances, both versions of secondary red dots will outperform your primary magnified optic. It's up to you to prioritize which scenarios your optic will be the best suited for. The chart below might help. For flat range shooting, I'd go with the offset for close range and the primary magnified optic for distance. For shooting around cover, you just should use whatever optic you can pick up first while exposing the least amount of your body. So it's basically a draw with a slight preference away from the piggyback due to the height over bore challenges. And for passive aiming with night vision, piggyback is the best option. but not by leaps and bounds if you take a few things into consideration when setting up your rifle. And keep in mind that this is a use case that will be far less common for most of us than daytime traditional stance shooting. So the winner between offset and piggyback is pretty clear to me for most of my rifles. Now, if you just don't like offset red dots, don't find them comfortable, that's fine. But if you haven't tried either, offsets could work for you. Conventional wisdom used to be that these were viable secondary optics, but it seems like we are heading away from that, and I don't know why. So there you go, guys. Hop, brass facts, love you guys. Let me know if I'm way off base here. And remember, I'm just a guy with a bunch of guns and a crippling gun buying habit, so you probably shouldn't listen to me anyway. That's it, fellas. Like, subscribe, you know the thing. I'll catch you later.